Hi, everybody. I have had several clients reach out to me based on my last video on Wix and Squarespace being spawn of the devil. So what I'd like to do is kind of explain a little bit more about what you need to get a website and why it's easy to get stuck in the trap that they have established for you. So when you set up a website, usually you need a few things. You're going to need a domain name. And that is basically the name of your business. So you're going to wind up searching for that. You can go to multiple sites. Usually people define the name of their business before they get the domain name, but some people set up the domain name first. But bottom line, you're going to need a domain name. That is technically going to find you. What's your name? The next thing you need after you get a domain name is usually you want to get, well, if you get a domain name, you're going to want to get some email to that domain name. So you want to get email. Oop, let me get up here. Mail. I did that all wrong. Anyways, let's try that again. Who cares? Email, you know what that is. All right. So you get domain name, and then with that domain name, you can attach an email to that. So once you established your misspacman.com, you can say, I am at misspacman.com or whatever your name is. All right? So domain name, then email. But then once you get those established, that's how you start generating leads for your business. You have a name and you have an email address. Then what people do is they'll set up a website. And that is your signpost, technically. So you have your address, you have your contact info, and then you have your information effectively on the site. Or, you can do funnel generation, you can do however. But these are the core components for developing your place online. Now, what happens is people are like, this is a lot, because domain name, there's thousands of places you can go. Email, well, you used to be able to host your own email, you still can, but there are really two principal players in that. And I'm not talking about Proton Mail, or I'm just saying for business or enterprise level clients, you've got 365 or Gmail. And then your website, this is where things get confusing, because what happens is people say, I want to start a business, I want to be established, but they start here. They start at the website. And that's the problem that everybody gets into. When you start with the website, you're like, wow, I want a place where I get up my website, and then you go to Squarespace or Wix, or even GoDaddy, and you give you a website. Then they say, well, do you have a domain name? No. Well, you get a domain name. Do you have email? Would you like you? Of course. Do you have text services? Do you want lead generation? Oh, you want a storefront? When you give all of this to one individual company, it's like setting up in a Roach Motel. So do you remember Roach Motels? They get in, but they can't get out. Every step you take with a website or a domain or email, or other suite of services is a step deeper and deeper into a Roach Motel. So my suggestion, before you start looking at like building a business overnight and building a business instantaneously, start with the basics. You start with your domain name, setting up your email, and then your website. Now, what happens when this is already happening? What happens when this is where you're at? You've already made a mess of things. Well, that's where I've been helping clients out more or less for the entirety of 2020 and 2021. People have been taking the pandemic to get themselves set up. What you need to do is when you get a domain from Squarespace, they're brokering that domain to you. You don't own that domain, they do. And if you failed to pay, you couldn't get that domain back. That domain is under Squarespace. You would have to acquire it from Squarespace. So my first thing I generally tell people to do is acquire their domain back. So get it out of there. Get your domain out of there. And again, you're going to see, we're just going to do this almost in the reverse process of this. Acquire your domain back. That gives you ownership of that. Once you have ownership of your domain, then you can change what is called DNS records. That falls under your domain. So now you have access to DNS records that include name server. If these are new terms to you, there's a reason for that. It's because they've been hidden from you by Squarespace. If you do any kind of search on like a whois lookup on ICANN or 2cows or whatever, you'll see that they're the registrar of the domain, or effectively they're the owner of the domain and they're registering it through somebody else. Effectively what you would be doing, they're a middleman. But they control your DNS records, which is all of the records that your domain points to, whether it be mail or your website, or if you're setting up third-party services, that goes under DNS. Your name servers are where you're hosted. Effectively, they are taking on the responsibility of all these records. They own them. So number one step, get your domain back. Number two, once you have those, you can attach, because your DNS records then can set up your mail. If your mail is stuck in there, or if you're effectively, if they're a reseller of your, if you get Google Workspace through Squarespace, you're paying them double the fee. So for mail, what we would want to do is we would want to either move the mail over to Google Workspace. So effectively cut Squarespace out or migrate to a new platform. A lot of people are paying a significant amount more by paying them as a reseller. So DNS records here allow us to set up your mail, and your MX records. That's terrible. Anyways, MX records. Now that you have your name servers, you can set up your website. Now, you're like, well, it was super easy to set up my website over at Squarespace. Was it? Really? You are working with, I'd say, a very early set of Legos. And that's not a bad thing a lot of the time. But if you want to add SEO tools, or if you want to add ways to kind of expand your audience by filtering or funneling them through a certain process, well, you're going to have to pay extra for that. You're going to have to jump up to the next level, the next tier with Wix and Squarespace. So a website requires a few things. So here's the deal. Once you have your website away from Squarespace, you'll need a few things. You will need hosting. And that's effectively like, hey, I want to set up my business. Where's my office? Like, hosting is effectively your office. So that's the storage of all of your images, assets. That's where your site lives. Is in hosting. Then you have, whoa, I'm going to get another one of these. Platform. What platform is it built on? So is it built on, is it strictly HTML? Do you want to build it in WordPress, which is a builder? Anyways, there's multiple ways of building sites out these days. So when you're building your website, there's a bunch of considerations to take into place, especially if you're looking to rescue it from a situation. Because if I have to pay for a domain name, if I have to pay for email, and I have to pay for website, that's 3 places I'm paying. That's very expensive, isn't it? Well, domain names can run anywhere from $8, or you can get them for $5, all the way up to, again, if you're having a very specific domain, or if you have to buy them, they can go up to a significant amount. But generally, domain names, if they don't exist, $5 to $25, I'd say at the max. Again, there are TLDs now that cost more. Just saying that's a general cost. So let's just say that's around $20. Email services at $365. You can get a deal, I think, for $5 for a very small business. It usually runs around $8 to $12 per user on this one. With Gmail, generally you can get away with just the basic, which is $6, but it runs $6 to $12. So let's put it this way. We're at $20 a year, and then we're at, let's just say, making it average 10, we're at $120 a year. So that's $140 between the two of these. Now, website. Website development is going to cost you probably a little bit more, but we're at 140 here. Website development will be hosting, which costs around about 15, 20 bucks a month. That really works out to about, let's just say $200 a year. That's 340 bucks. And again, that's higher priced, but that's with somebody who manages the server. If you go on somebody like, we mentioned HostGator earlier, the challenge with that is you're paying $4.95 a month and you're on effectively a server with 700 other websites that are potentially malware laden, or you're on a virtual server. Your site doesn't even exist. It's not even on it's basically an instance that has been created and backed up. So websites generally cost around 15, 20 bucks a month. And that is basically when on servers that are maintained. Then it's the development cost of what does it cost to develop your site. And that could be, if you have an existing site that you're porting over, that could be as cheap as $1,000, $900, right? And I know that's not cheap, but once you set it up, it's on the proper platform. After that, you're not going to be building your website anymore. So the significant cost goes away. So now you're just stuck with email costs, which are necessary evil, and your website costs for $200. So $340 a year, which comes down to what, approximately $28, $28.95. I can't remember the number, but it's like 30 bucks a month. And the thing is that if you ever have to move, you control it all. You will pay to get out of this mess. You could pay hundreds of dollars because they're going to, we have one of my favorite clients. He's a filmmaker. He's making films. He's a technical person, but he's technical in the film capacity. He had lost his domain to a domain provider that he was working with, and losing his domain because he didn't have an email address because his service lapsed. So he didn't have the domain and he couldn't create a new email address. So they were holding his domain hostage. So what we wound up having to do is create a fake instance based on whatever credentials we could of an email address, we basically made a server for fake email, and wound up having to spend 14 days trying to get them to validate the account. And once we did, we were able to rescue his domain. But if it wasn't a client of mine, that could have cost him hundreds of dollars to do that. That's freaking crazy. And so that's what a lot of people are getting into with this mess, is that they don't know what's here. They think it's a one-stop shop, but they realize they outgrow this thing very quickly. Wix and Squarespace outgrow. Bottom line, if you're starting new, get your own domain. Get it from Google Domains. Get it from Namecheap. Get it from anywhere. I've got a bunch of recommendations down below. If you are setting up email, set it up with somebody competent. Don't $6 a month. If you can't afford $6 a month for your email, or if you're cheaping out on $6 a month, maybe your business isn't viable, right? I mean, I know $6 is $6, but spend it right out of the gate, because then you get your mail delivered, you get it sent. It's not being blacklisted. You've got all of these things that are beneficial to pay in by, or you can use 365, either way, but you set it up yourself. Then the third one is your website, your hosting. You can set that up on Square. You can set that up on Wix, but initially you really should more or less consider doing it right the first time. Setting it up on a server, getting some web developer who's worth their salt, and is not just saying they're going to, like, somebody who's willing to put in the time early on, like somebody to walk you through these steps, is very, very key, because you want that technical expertise. You want to feel like you're being taken care of. You don't want to be set up and then forgot about, which is what happens a lot of times with these small boutique design companies, which of course we are one, which is crazy. We are design, but I'm saying, like, unless you find somebody who knows what they're talking about, knows what they're doing, and is willing to kind of help you through it and understand it without being like, it's complicated. You really don't want to get involved because it's too complicated. If you're working with somebody like that, you're always going to be like led around by your nose. So these videos are only to kind of help people understand what they're getting into, how to get out of it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train, but it is it is definitely a way away from Wix and Squarespace and GoDaddy, where you want to be. Anyways, this has been Neil Bauer for the Web Minute, which I just made up right now. And hopefully, if you have any questions, give me a call. Numbers in the description down below. Have a good one, everybody.